the devastation at Sandy Hook. Before she even took the oath of office, she was there for the families of those children. And she's been there in this House, serving along with Mike Thompson as co-chair of our Gun Violence Committee. Elizabeth Esty from Connecticut.
I'm so proud to be standing here with my friends and colleagues tonight. The energy in this room, I want to let you know, is duplicated by a crowd that is growing outside the Capitol tonight.
Yeah.
Of Americans organically arising, of Americans who know that this institution of American democracy is about people's voices being heard. And they're being heard loud and clear across the country tonight. I am getting texts and tweets from my kids, from their friends, from my ministers, from my former ministers who have moved away, all saying, you stand together. You stand tall and stand up for the American people. Reporters are asking, what is different tonight? You've been here before, all of you. How many moments of silence? If the death of 20 school children and 6 teachers wasn't enough, what will it take? It takes courage. It takes unity. And we are seeing that here tonight. And it takes civil disobedience. John Lewis has led us today because he understands that the vote is the most essential quality an American has. And right now, the leadership of this House has deprived the members of the public of vote because our voices have been silenced, because we have not been allowed a single vote in 3.5 years that I've been in Congress. In 3.5 years, not one hearing, not one vote on not one single bill to help keep Americans safe from gun violence. Not one. That's why we had no choice but to take over the floor. That's why we have no choice but to ensure that the vote of the people is reflected in debate and votes in this House. So to all of you who are gathered here today, thank you. And those who are watching, thank you. And text and write and call and demand that this House live up to the highest aspirations of the American people. We talk about tragedies. Tragedies are unpreventable. They're acts of God. That's not what we're looking at here. It's not. Since Sandy Hook, 100,000 Americans have been killed with a gun. Think about that. 100,000. Now, that number's so big, it doesn't even make sense. That's bigger than what we see in wars. Yet that is what the inaction of this House has allowed to happen. Think about the story of a single person. We've heard stories today of each individual, and when their lives are taken, families are ripped apart, and the ripples of that spread out through whole communities. So the damage is to tens of millions of Americans who are crying out tonight, act. Do something. We need a vote. We need a vote. We need a vote to protect the American people. We're sworn to protect the Constitution and uphold it. We're sworn to protect the American people. And that is what's at stake tonight. No fly, no buy. If you are too dangerous to get on an airplane, what business do you do? Do you have legally buying as many weapons as you want and as much ammunition as you want? The American people cannot believe that this is true. If you think of what you have to go through when you go to an airport, take off your belt, take off your shoes, take out your eye drops, and stand through a scanner, But if you're a would-be terrorist, guess what? You can just go and buy whatever you want. That makes no sense. And it's up to this House to fix it. We need a vote on no fly, no buy. And we need a vote on background checks. 20 years ago, I don't know how you did your holiday shopping, but you probably didn't do it on the internet. And guess what? People buying guns, that's where they're going now. They're going to the internet. And so what used to be a small loophole, the gun show loophole, has gotten huge. It's about 40% of sales now. So frankly, it's kind of amazing we stop anybody with background checks right now. And we have. We stopped more than 2 million gun purchases. But it's kind of the stupid criminals we'll get now who are dumb enough to actually go to a federally licensed dealer. That's how easy it is. It was as if a terrorist waiting in line to get on a plane, fully loaded with a suicide vest, was allowed to pick to just walk on the plane without having to go through security clearance. Folks, we can fix this. There are some things that are hard. Getting up every morning when you've lost a child to gun violence, that's hard. That's really hard. That's what Nicole Hockley does every day. Her son, Dylan Hockley, was gunned down in his first grade classroom. And Nicole didn't choose this life. She didn't choose a life where she cries and gets up every day and travels America to try to help other families, to try to make this country safer, to try to make American democracy to live up to its promise. But she does, because that's what needs to get done. And what we need to do in this House, and what whoever occupies this chair needs to do, is allow us a vote. No bill, no break. No bill, no break. It's time for a vote. It's time for a vote. The families of America deserve no less from their elected officials.
Job is done.
From Washington State, and our leader on the Armed Services Committee, Adam Smith.
In the live video. You can't even tell.
That's a good game plan.
This, they brought in food.
To block the microphone.
Later, I still got constituents who have guns. We heard that President Obama was going to take away everybody's gun. 8 years later, we're still here. All we want is common sense. There's a number of different pieces to this, but the two that have been mentioned are so simple. We should have universal background checks, so if you are legally barred from buying a gun, you don't. It's very simple and very straightforward. We don't have that, we don't have that, but we have all kinds of loopholes that allow people to buy guns. And the second piece is, if you are considered a threat to this country, and this is where my Armed Services Committee work and national security work really hits home for me, if you are considered a threat to this country and are not allowed to fly on an airplane, then you certainly shouldn't be allowed to buy a weapon. I also want to bring attention to another piece of legislation, and I think Mike Thompson or John Lewis introduced it, that basically said if you are being watched by the FBI as a potential terrorist, you should be prevented from buying a firearm, and they should be immediately notified if you try to do that. That's what we're asking for here today. And I really want to applaud my colleagues for having the courage. You know, oftentimes, we say in the House, we don't have the filibuster, we can't stop things, we can't force things. Well, you're showing where there's a will, there's a way. That we will force a vote on these common sense gun control pieces of legislation. That we won't go until we get that vote. I want to say one final thing. I hope this is just the first step, because stopping gun violence in this country is not just about sensible gun control laws. I mean, that's certainly a big piece of it. But I'll mention just one other. Mental health issues in this country. We do not do enough for people with mental health. Many of you here served with Gabby Giffords. And I remember the day standing in this well when she resigned from Congress because she couldn't come back. It was one of the saddest days of my life that she wasn't able to do that. The person who shot her and killed those 6 other people and shot the other people in Tucson, it was obvious to everybody who knew him that he had a major problem. And this has been the case with many of these shootings. And yet our laws are inadequate to do anything about it, to deal with the mental health problem. So I hope that what we force here today is a vote on this legislation, but larger than that, we force a comprehensive approach to all that contributes to the senseless violence in this country, to the over 30,000 deaths a year that are caused by firearms. We must stand up. We must force this vote. So I applaud you for your effort here today. I want to go home like everybody else, but I'm not going to do it until we get a vote on this. So no break.
No vote.
No vote.
Stacy Plast, where are you? Stacy here? Then quickly we'll go to Seth Mulhern.
Seth Mulhern.
Here's Seth right there.
Seth.
Mulhern.
Just so you know, Seth will be followed by Jim Costa, who will be followed by Lloyd Doggett.
I came to this house from the United States Marine Corps. I had to carry an assault rifle every single day to do my job. I've seen the effects of gun violence firsthand. I know what it looks like when someone gets shot. I know what it looks like when one of your friends or colleagues is bleeding out on the battlefield. There is no place for that on America's streets. There's no place for that in America's schools. There's no place for that in America's movie theaters. There's no place for that in America's nightclubs. And there is a big difference between a Marine or a soldier who's trained for hours upon hours, months upon months on the rifle range to know how to use a weapon safely. There's a big difference between that and a civilian, a terrorist, who can walk into a gun shop or a gun show or go online and legally buy weapons of war today. Every single amendment to the Constitution has reasonable restrictions. Even the First Amendment has reasonable restrictions. In fact, even the Second Amendment has reasonable restrictions. I not only carried an assault rifle with me every day, I carried a grenade. I was trained to use a grenade and carry it safely. But we have made a decision as a society that we will not allow civilians to walk around with grenades. We don't allow civilians to walk around with landmines or rockets. There are a lot of weapons of war that are reasonably restricted here at home. I support the Second Amendment, as does just about everybody on the floor today. But you don't have to be opposed to the Second Amendment to believe in reasonable restrictions to keep our country safe. And what we're asking for is so reasonable. If you're on a no-fly list, if you're not allowed to fly, you ought not to be able to buy a gun.
That's right.
And if there are problems with the no-fly list, then let's fix it. But tell me this. If there are so many problems with the no-fly list, why do we have the no-fly list? Why are these people not allowed to fly? I'm sure that has nothing to do with the fact that everybody in this body flies home every weekend. Is the freedom to travel not afforded to Americans? Is that not a right that we care about? Do we live in a government that can go and tell you you're not going to get on that plane just arbitrarily? No. That's a basic freedom. It's so basic we didn't even have to include it in the Bill of Rights. If there's a problem with the no-fly list, then let's fix it. universal background checks. 9 out of 10 Americans believes we ought to have universal background checks if you buy guns. Now, think about the system that we have today. Think about it in terms of flying. We're talking about flying. Imagine if our security system for the TSA were that if you went up to an airline ticket counter and bought a ticket from the airline, you had to go through security. But if you buy that same ticket online, don't worry about it. Just go right around. You don't need to go through security. You bought that ticket online. That's the system we have. Those are the laws that we have for buying guns today. That's absurd.
It's absurd.
It's absurd.
It's absolutely absurd. How many of you would get on a plane if you saw everybody who bought that ticket, bought their ticket online, just going right around security? I don't think any of us would be comfortable flying. And yet, that's perfectly acceptable when it comes to buying guns.
I like that. That's good. Yeah, that's good.
When Speaker Ryan took that seat, took that chair that's vacant right now, he spoke about working with Democrats and Republicans. And he said specifically that if we could just have an intellectually honest debate in this House, we could do some good things for the American people. An intellectually honest debate. Well, it's not intellectually honest if you can't even conduct a study on gun violence. That's not intellectual honesty. It's not intellectually honest if we cannot even have a debate in the House of Representatives on reasonable restrictions to keep communities safe.
That's right.
It's not intellectually honest if we can't even be on TV when we're here because the Speaker of the House has shut off the TV cameras.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right.
And it is not intellectually honest if we cannot even have a vote. Fundamentally, what we're asking for tonight is just a bit of honesty. It's honesty to do our jobs, to represent the American people. When 9 out of 10 Americans out there in our country today agree with what we're asking for, think we're reasonable, we ought to just do our jobs. That's what we're here to do. Just do our jobs for the American people. Let's just do our jobs.
Let's do our job.
Let's do our jobs.
Good job, Seth. No break. No break. No break. No break.
Debbie Dingle just showed me a post. And in that post it said that they were going to come here and remove us from the floor.
You better have a crane.
Are you ready?
We're ready.
Are you fired up?
Yeah.
Are you ready to go?
Ready to go.
You ready to stand up for America?
Yeah.
You ready to stand for a vote? Rise up, Democrats! Come to the floor. Jim Costa.
As members of Congress, we have to ask ourselves, at what point are we going to have this honest discussion about public safety in America? At what point are we going to have an opportunity to discuss the impact that hate crimes are having throughout America? When? Like many of you here, I strongly support the Second Amendment. I grew up in a family with guns that used them for hunting and for self-protection. This isn't about the Second Amendment. When will enough be enough?
Enough is enough.
If now is not the time, then when is the time? The deadly shooting in Orlando could have happened anywhere in the United States. It has, sadly. Just last night in my district, a 20-month-old was shot and killed in front of his parents. Fresno Police Chief Jerry Dyer stated that a tragedy occurred in our city last night. Chief Dyer is absolutely right. And the sad reality is we do not have a consensus on the appropriate policies needed to prevent these tragedies from happening again, whether it was in Fresno last night, Orlando last Sunday, or anywhere else around America where this has happened too often. We have to stop playing politics if we're going to have an honest conversation on how we prevent hate crimes and other violent crimes that continue to happen in communities across our land. We have to have that discussion. We are a legislative body. We have to be able to do our...
The devastation at Sandy Hook. Before she even took the oath of office,